Bella's breaks down, Pedro's done, and HBO just killed The Last of Us 3 without even a press release. The red carpet smiles? Fake. The chemistry? Gone. And now, Pedro's finally speaking out, privately blaming Bella for the entire collapse. What was once TV gold is now a flaming mess of drama, shady moves, and backstage betrayals. Fans are furious, viewership tanked, and the internet's on fire. This isn't just a flop, it's a fallout. And trust me, it's only getting messier. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The Last of Us had become an instant phenomenon, with critics praising it as one of the greatest video game adaptations ever made. Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey were suddenly everywhere. Red carpets, award stages, magazine covers. But while the media sold fans a flawless partnership and a legendary new series, some were already starting to question the foundation. The issue? Ellie. More specifically, Bella Ramsey's version of Ellie. When the series began, Bella played a believable 14-year-old, matching the character's age from the game's opening arc. But when Season 2 was announced, fans were confused. The storyline was jumping 5 years ahead, but Bella, who still looked and acted like Season 1's Ellie, wasn't recast. For a character now supposed to be 19, the lack of change felt jarring. The internet lit up with debate. Would she be able to carry a darker, more emotionally complex version of Ellie? Or would the show pretend time hadn't passed at all? What started as small discussions on forums quickly turned into full-blown criticism. Some argued that her performance lacked growth. Others said she hadn't matured into the weight the role required. HBO stayed quiet, hoping fans would adjust. But behind the curtain, sources now say even the cast and crew had concerns, ones they weren't allowed to voice publicly. It wasn't just about how Bella looked. It was about whether she could embody a version of Ellie who'd been through more loss, more trauma, and more transformation. The kind of emotional evolution fans expected just never came. But here's where things really start to twist. Pedro Pascal, known for being diplomatic and media savvy, reportedly shared those doubts. Quietly, privately. And this silence wasn't loyalty. It was the beginning of a rift. Because while Bella pushed forward, trying to convince the world she was still the right choice, others weren't so sure. And that uncertainty? It was only the beginning. Because next came the silence. And Pedro's silence was louder than words. Next up, what Pedro didn't say, and why it shattered everything. While the fan base argued and debated, Pedro Pascal said nothing. Not a tweet. Not a quote. Not a word of support for Bella Ramsey as criticism mounted. At first, it seemed like strategy, staying neutral, staying professional. But now, insiders are saying the silence was anything but innocent. Pedro wasn't staying out of the drama. He was avoiding it, and maybe even agreeing with it. According to sources close to the production, Pedro had grown frustrated with the direction the show was taking, and Bella's performance was part of that frustration. He wasn't confrontational about it. Instead, he stayed silent, deliberately. He reportedly told those around him that speaking out would only make things worse. But in Hollywood, silence speaks volumes, especially when the house is already on fire. Fans started to notice. As hashtags like #NotMyEllie went viral, Pedro didn't step up to defend his co-star. And the longer he stayed quiet, the louder the message became. People who once believed Pedro and Bella had an unbreakable bond began to wonder if it was all just for show. Was their chemistry real? Or just clever PR? And behind the scenes, that silence created a ripple effect. Cast and crew felt the tension. Interviews became awkward. And the fans, always watching, started to piece things together. The cracks in the armor were becoming impossible to ignore. But then came Season 2. And everything truly started to unravel. The release of Season 2 was supposed to be a victory lap, a darker, deeper continuation of a story that had already captivated the world. Instead, it turned into a PR disaster. From the very first episode, something felt off. Fans were uneasy. The pacing, the tone, the character choices, it all felt heavier, but not in a good way. And the numbers told the real story. Viewership dropped episode after episode. Hardcore fans were furious. Joel's fate, controversial in the video game, hit even harder on screen. Many viewers called the show unrecognizable from the first season. Forums lit up with angry threads. YouTubers posted takedowns. Twitter exploded with backlash. And who was at the center of it? Bella Ramsey. Critics called her performance flat, saying she hadn't aged into the role emotionally or physically. Some even accused HBO of caring more about agendas than storytelling. Behind the scenes, the mood was grim. The cast was tense, public appearances became shorter, promotion felt forced, and worst of all, there was no clear defense. HBO stayed quiet. Pedro stayed quiet. Bella, left to face the heat alone, struggled to keep up. What was once a beloved show had become a weekly controversy. And for Bella, the pressure was becoming unbearable. It was a moment that changed everything. Just days after news quietly broke that HBO had shelved Season 3, paparazzi caught Bella Ramsey leaving a London charity event, visibly shaken, eyes red, clearly holding back tears. Her team scrambled to get her into a car, but the cameras captured everything. And within minutes, those photos were everywhere. Fans speculated, critics piled on, and social media went wild. People wanted to know, what happened behind the scenes? Why was she so emotional? Was it just about the cancellation or something deeper? Insiders say the real reason wasn't just HBO pulling the plug. It was Pedro Pascal's silence. Bella had reportedly held out hope that he'd say something, anything, in her defense. But as the pressure grew, Pedro didn't budge. The co-star she once leaned on had ghosted her. And that realization hit harder than any critic ever could. Sources claim Bella had been struggling behind the scenes for months, battling online hate, mounting pressure, and growing distance from her once closest castmate. And now, with no show, no support, and no voice backing her, the emotional fallout hit like a freight train. But what really made things explode was what Pedro finally started saying behind closed doors. For a long time, Pedro Pascal kept his thoughts to himself. But privately, he was done, furious even. According to crew members, Pedro had grown more and more frustrated with the franchise's leadership. He reportedly called the direction chaotic and criticized HBO's casting choices, especially Bella's. One source described his tone as controlled but cold. He wasn't yelling. He was cutting. Pedro had concerns from the beginning about whether Bella could evolve with the story's demands. Those concerns were ignored. As production dragged on, the mood on set soured. People described it as tense, awkward. Nobody wanted to say the wrong thing. The final straw? Bella's performance during a critical emotional arc in Season 2. According to insiders, Pedro believed it lacked the impact needed to carry the season. And once the negative feedback started pouring in from fans, he saw it as proof that the show had gone off track. Pedro didn't blast Bella publicly, but his quiet criticism spread through the industry. And once that word got out, the dynamic between the show's leads shattered. Next came the red carpet, and things only got colder from there. Season 2's premiere wasn't supposed to feel this tense. Cameras flashed, fans screamed, and the cast arrived, just like always. But something felt off. Pedro and Bella didn't walk the carpet together. They didn't pose side by side. They didn't even exchange glances. The smiles were stiff. The energy strained. And fans? They noticed immediately. Body language experts on social media had a field day. They broke down every photo, every awkward pause. The distance between Pedro and Bella wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Gone were the warm interactions from Season 1's press tour. Gone were the inside jokes, the on-screen chemistry that made them fan favorites. In its place was silence. Icy, obvious silence. Insiders say HBO noticed too. In fact, some claim the studio deliberately kept Pedro and Bella apart during promo events. They didn't want uncomfortable questions. They didn't want awkward interviews. And they definitely didn't want headlines pointing out the rift fans were already whispering about. But no matter how much damage control they tried, the truth couldn't be hidden. Pedro and Bella were no longer a united front. And for a show that had built its emotional core on their bond, that was a huge problem. Viewers felt it. The press felt it. And suddenly, the cracks in the show weren't just behind the scenes. They were visible in every public moment. But this public distance was just the tip of the iceberg. Bella was about to make a move that would light everything on fire. It started with one post. Bella Ramsey tweeted about a divisive global issue, something completely unrelated to The Last of Us. But the timing? Disastrous. The series was already under fire. Fans were frustrated, critics were circling, and Bella's tweet poured gasoline on an already burning situation. The backlash was instant. People accused her of being tone-deaf, unprofessional, and distracting from the already fragile state of the show. Some fans felt betrayed, claiming she was using the platform of The Last of Us to push personal beliefs. Others accused her of ignoring the real issue, the show's collapse. But the real shock came from within the cast. According to insiders, Pedro Pascal was furious. He reportedly called her post reckless and self-sabotaging. In private conversations, he vented that Bella's social media behavior was making everything worse. The show was already teetering on the edge, and now it was falling fast. Fan petitions began to circulate. One calling for Bella to be recast gained tens of thousands of signatures. The hashtag #recast Ellie started trending. HBO executives were scrambling. Internally, people argued over how to handle the situation. But Pedro? He didn't say anything publicly. He didn't need to. Because behind the scenes, he had already made his decision, and fans were about to start noticing. Hollywood may be built on stories, but social media reveals the truth. Fans began digging, and what they found? It spoke volumes. Pedro Pascal wasn't following Bella on Instagram. He hadn't tagged her in months. She wasn't showing up in his stories. And when asked about the show in interviews, his answers were suddenly vague. No more excitement, no more praise, just clipped responses, subtle dodges, and generic compliments. Fans noticed every pause, every lack of energy. It was clear Pedro was pulling away. Meanwhile, Bella's social media presence grew defensive. She started posting cryptic messages, hinting at stress, pressure, and being misunderstood. She didn't name names, but the subtext was clear. She felt alone. Industry insiders say Pedro's distance was intentional. He didn't want to get dragged into the negativity. He was protecting his image. He was done defending a series he no longer believed in. For viewers, the shift was undeniable. Their on-screen chemistry had gone cold, and their real-life dynamic was unraveling for all to see. But this wasn't just a personal falling out. It was a sign of something much bigger. Because the show itself was about to collapse entirely. With every episode, the damage grew. Fans weren't just upset, they were angry. Season 2 felt like a betrayal. The storytelling, once sharp and emotional, now felt forced. Critics slammed it for losing touch with what made the original special. Viewers said it felt more like a lecture than a story. Even longtime defenders of the show began to admit something had gone very wrong, and then came the clips. Old interviews of Bella resurfaced where she called the original game outdated and said she wasn't concerned with fan opinions. That didn't go over well. Fans who had tried to give her the benefit of the doubt now felt insulted. The backlash reached a boiling point. Neil Druckmann, the series' creator, also faced heat. People accused him of steering the show into dangerous territory, away from the game's core and into something more political than personal. The criticism wasn't just loud, it was relentless. HBO, once proud of The Last of Us, now found itself stuck. The internet mocked the show. Memes spread like wildfire. Headlines read more like obituaries than reviews. What was once the crown jewel of streaming had become its most embarrassing flop. And then, without warning, came the final blow. There was no grand announcement, no heartfelt farewell, just a quiet corporate statement buried in a press release. The Last of Us Season 3 had been shelved. The reason? Creative differences and fan reception. But fans knew better. This wasn't about storylines or production schedules. This was damage control. Behind the scenes, the chaos was worse than anyone imagined. Bella Ramsey's social media accounts were locked down. Her team canceled interviews. Public sightings became rare. It was clear she was retreating. Pedro Pascal, meanwhile, was moving on. He had already signed onto new projects, avoided questions about the show, and stopped engaging with fan posts. The message was clear. The Last of Us was over, and he wasn't looking back. For HBO, it was a lesson in how quickly things can fall apart. For fans, it was heartbreak. And for Bella, it was the painful reality of fame, when the spotlight turns harsh and unforgiving. But even as the series ended, the ripple effects were far from done. What happened to The Last of Us wasn't just a bad season or a casting misstep. It was the unraveling of something that once felt untouchable. A perfect storm of studio decisions, creative risks, and clashing egos. Bella Ramsey, once hailed as the bold new face of Ellie, became a lightning rod. Pedro Pascal, once her biggest supporter, became her loudest silence. But this isn't just a story about a show. It's about Hollywood, about how fast success can fade, about how silence can hurt more than words, about how even billion-dollar franchises can crack under pressure, and most importantly, how no one, not even a fan favorite, is safe when a project falls apart. The Last of Us may be canceled, but its legacy, the drama, the division, the downfall, is just getting started. Because in Hollywood, failure doesn't fade, it lingers, and every whisper behind closed doors eventually finds its way out. So the real question is, what happens next? Stay tuned.